Hi VC, it's Aaron, Mutha Alamere. Today I am ranking the Beatle records. Now, recently, just in the last couple of days, I saw two of my great friends in the vinyl community do this. And the first one that did it was Sam St. John, who went back and redid his, most people have done this list in the VC, if they've been in the VC. And then I saw Steve from All the Worlds of Stage do it, and their lists were completely different, and mine's completely different than theirs. Now, I'm not saying my list is right, theirs are wrong. Everybody's list is right for them. And that's just how these are. It's all personal preference. Has a lot to do with how you grew up listening to them and how long you've heard them, how old you are. I know I was born in 1970. So my first musical memories are hearing the Beatles when I was 2 and 3 years old. We had two Beatle records in my household, and it was Abbey Road and Revolver. So I heard those records before I heard any other Beatles stuff. And it was just, I heard those over and over, and they became ingrained in my head, and they were my favorite band from the start. Instantly, I mean, my parents had other vinyl records, but those were the ones I was drawn to, especially one song in particular, which was Octopus's Garden. When I was 2 and 3 years old, that was my first favorite song I ever had, and it was my favorite song for, my whole young childhood. And because of that song, I really, really got into music, and I became obsessed with music at a really young age. And I owe all of my vinyl I have now and all my love of music to that song, Octopus's Garden, which is a lot of people's one of their least favorite Beatles songs. To me, it's one of my favorites just because of that. And I still enjoy listening to it. Now, of course, in the 70s and 80s, we didn't have the internet. There was no streaming. So you had to actually own physical copies of these records to listen to them or have somebody copy them for you. So I remember I only had those, and then my parents had Magical Mystery Tour on 8-track a couple years later, and those were the three I grew up listening to the most in my younger age. And then I remember I'd go over to my dad's, to my uncle's house with my dad, and we'd watch his house, and he had a bunch of records, and then that introduced me to the Red and the Blue records, and then he had the White album and a few other Beatle records, and I started listening to them, and then I expanded it a little more. And then my parents got divorced when I was 13, and my stepfather had a bunch of Beatles records. So then he had like Sgt. Pepper and Hey Jude and a few others that I hadn't heard a whole lot of. I just heard songs. And that totally, made it go more. And then by the time I was in my 20s, I'd heard every album quite a bit. So on this ranking, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to do it with, just ranking my favorite albums. I'm doing 14 records here. Now, I could just do the American records. I could just do the UK records. But to me, there's pros and cons of both. Now, I never really heard the UK versions until later on in life. But I'll have to say, when I heard them, almost all of them I thought were superior to the U.S. versions, except for the exception of the first two, which I think are not as good as the U.S. versions. So I'm using the U.S. Meet the Beatles and the Beatles' second record instead of Please Please Me and With the Beatles, because I think they're stronger. The rest of the way, I'm using the UK versions up until Revolver. And then after Revolver, they intermingle. But there's a couple other exceptions, which are Magical Mystery Tour, which, in the UK was only an EP. In America, it was a full album. And a lot of people say, oh, that's not a real album. But the songs on the other side, with an exception of, I think, just one, was never on any other record. So to me, that's a Beatles record, a full Beatle record. And I'm also using Hey Jude, because that came out, just a year or two after Let It Be. And it had all songs, except for the exception of one again, that were never on another record. And most of them were later Beatles records that could have made a whole nother record. I think that is an official Beatle record to me. Hey Jude, I put right up there with all the others. So I'll have 14 records on this, and I'll get started here. My number 14 is Beatles for Sale. And I'll have to say, this record here, I like better than 90% of the records by any other artist. That's how much I love the Beatles, that my least favorite of them is one of my favorite records of all time. Now, this is a really good record. I just don't like it. It's my least favorite of the records here. It's got No Reply, I'm a Loser, Rock and Roll Music. I'll Follow the Sun is one of my favorites on here, if not my favorite. 8 Days a Week, of course, is great. Honey Don't. I love the Ringo songs. I've always loved Ringo. He was my favorite Beatle when I was a kid. And, but the rest of, it's a really good album, but it's my least favorite. At number 13, most people's least favorite, or they don't even use it, Yellow Submarine. Now, this one has a couple of songs that appear on other records, and they're Yellow Submarine and All You Need Is Love. But I think those two are amazing. The reason I like this a little better, there's a couple songs on here, like Hey Bulldog, Only a Northern Song, and It's All Too Much, one of the most underrated Beatles songs to me. I love those three songs so much that I like it better than the Beatles for Sale, along with Yellow Submarine, All You Need Is Love. The second side is pretty much a throwaway, of course, just George Martin stuff, instrumental stuff from the movie. So, but that's my 13. At number 12, I've got the Beatles' second album. I think this is, like I said, I think these are superior to the early Beatles stuff, but to me, they're just not as good as the other ones, but they're excellent. Roll Over Beethoven's on here. You Can't Do That. I love that song. Money is on here. You Really Got a Hold on Me. That's a great one. I Call Your Name. But the thing that I like better about this, it has She Loves You on it. And I love that song. I've loved it since I was a kid. So I had to throw in the second record. At number 11, I've got Meet the Beatles. And this is the introduction to the Beatles basically in America. Amazing record. I Want to Hold Your Hand. It's not on either of those two records, which is unbelievable to me. Love that song. I still love that song. I Saw Her Standing There is on here. All My Loving. Wow, I Want to Be Your Man. I love that song. Don't Bother Me. Excellent record. Meet the Beatles. And I think it's better than Please Please Me or With the Beatles. At number 10, I've got A Hard Day's Night. Another great album. This is far superior to the record there, A Hard Day's Night, the American version, which has all the parts from the movie, all the instrumentals. This has If I Fell is one of my favorites on here. Can't Buy Me Love, which is the one from Hey Jude that is on there. That's the copy. But I'll Be Back, one of the all-time great Beatles songs, of course. Amazing record, A Hard Day's Night. And number 9, and this one I've actually liked more in the last year, and this is Let It Be. I love Let It Be, and that's how much I love the Beatles, that this is number 9 for me, and it's a great album. Of course, it's got the huge hits that everyone knows, Get Back and Let It Be, and, Across the Universe is great. It's just an amazing record. I really love Two of Us, and I've Got a Feeling. One After 909 is kind of an earlier song, which is really cool. I Me Mine, the George Harrison song. Love that album at number 9. At number 8, Help. And Help is kind of a mixture for American-wise of there's the Help there and parts of Yesterday and Today. This has Yesterday on it. What a great album. I've just seen a Face, which was on the American Rubber Soul. They're all kind of intermixed. But I'm going with the UK versions here. Of course, the title song. Ticket to Ride, one of the best. Act Naturally's on here. Great album. Help at number 8. And number 7, and a lot of people think this is a compilation record. To me, it's a Beatles record because they're not really on any other records. And it's Hey Jude. Love Hey Jude. It's got that title song. The Ballad of John and Yoko has always been one of my favorite songs. Lady Madonna and Paperback Writer are both on here. Don't Let Me Down, which should have been on Let It Be, really. Old Brown Shoes, great. Rain, just an amazing record. I should have known better. That's one. I guess there's 2 that were on the other records. So, but this is an amazing record. One of the earliest Beatle records I listened to, really. At number 6, I've got Rubber Soul, and I really do prefer the UK version. There's a couple more songs, a couple different. If you just listen to the UK, I like this one better. Start to Drive My Car, of course, Norwegian Wood, Michelle, Nowhere Man, which makes it for me. I love that song. Run for Your Life, In My Life. What a great album. Rubber Soul at number 6. At number 5, I have got Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which by any other band would be their best album. And it's just because it's the Beatles, it's not, to me. Personally, it's not my favorite, even though this might be technically their best record. Just the 1, 2, 3 punch right out of the gate with the title song, with a little help from my friends, and Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, with a little help from my friends. If Ringo wasn't singing that, it wouldn't be as good. I don't care what anyone says about Ringo. I think it's just so good. And of course, A Day in the Life. I love Lovely Rita, and I love this whole album. This is a masterpiece, one of the all-time great albums. This will be in my top 20 albums of all time, and it's my number 5 Beatle record. And number 4, slightly better. I've always liked this just a bit more. Magical Mystery Tour. And, you know, say what you will about it. That first side is so amazing with the title song. The Fool on the Hill is so good. I really love Flying and Blue Jay Way, the instrumental in the George Harrison song that's very underappreciated. Your Mother Should Know is a really good Paul McCartney song. I Am the Walrus is one of my favorites ever. And then the other side that has the singles that were put on here. If they were on another record, I wouldn't even include this, but they're only on this, so that's the record. Hello, Goodbye, Strawberry Fields Forever, one of the top 5 Beatles songs ever. Penny Lane, Baby You're a Rich Man, All You Need Is Love. Number 4. Number 3, Revolver. And this, the top 3 to me are almost interchangeable. I love them all so much. You know, Taxman, I remember when I was a young kid hearing Taxman, it just was so unique. Love that intro to it, and it just has that grit to it. I love it. Eleanor Rigby, I think, is amazing. Nothing quite like it. You know, Here, There, and Everywhere, I think, is beautiful. Great song. I love Yellow Submarine on both albums. I've always loved it. I just love every song on this. Good Day Sunshine. Now, Good Day Sunshine, growing up in Idaho, was actually the song when I was a kid I heard the most on the radio, even though it wasn't a single. For some reason, I distinctly remember always hearing that on the radio playing here. Of course, you know, Tomorrow Never Knows. What an amazing song. Revolver at number 3. Number 2. So hard to put this at number 2 because it's in my top 5 records of all time. Abbey Road. Abbey Road at number 2. Come Together. Octopus's Garden. Oh, Darling is the hidden gem on here, if you can call it a hidden gem. But I Want You, She's So Heavy. I remember hearing that as a young kid, and that really, I think, is what inspired me to get into heavy metal. Later on in life, hard rock, the harder edge of things, hearing that so young. And, you know, Here Comes the Sun, and that great medley. Nothing's ever been done like it before or after, like the medley, as well as that. So good. Abbey Road, number 2. And that leaves at number 1, the White Album. Now, this one was a weird one because all those were my favorites. This one here I hadn't really heard until I was around 10 years old. And then I heard it, it's like, well, this is good, but there's a lot of weird songs, a lot of weird, and the more I heard it, and the more I heard it, it kept growing on me and growing on me through the years. And then finally, I remember distinctly, there's a certain song that tipped it for me. And I was at my friend's house, and we were drinking beers, you know, doing some funny stuff. And listening to this, he got it on CD, and I hadn't heard it in a while, and I heard it, and this song comes on. I was like, oh my God, this is a heavy metal song, and it's so energetic, and it was, Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except for Me and My Monkey. It's one of my top 10 Beatles songs. A lot of people hate it. It's absolutely one of my very favorites. Just the infectious chorus and the verses of how John sings that. And it is seriously, I think that and Helter Skelter are the kind of the beginnings of heavy metal. But, you know, just everything on here, I really love, you know, like Dear Prudence, of course. Glass Onion, I remember I was really into when I was a kid because I was really obsessed with the Paul is Dead stuff and looking for clues. And then you hear all this stuff in Glass Onion, and I was kind of obsessed with that song. And, you know, Rocky Raccoon I always loved, and Birthday. And then the continuing story of Bungalow Bill, I love that. It was just like when you're a young kid listening to that, and it's just like went out hunting with my elephant, you know, all that, all those lyrics. It was just so unique, and I loved it. But, you know, every song on this. And I actually like Revolution 9. I do skip it a lot of the time. If I'm in the mood for it, I really like it. But it's actually not my least favorite song on here. My least favorite would be Revolution 1, which I prefer the original. I don't like all the shooby-dooby stuff and how they mellowed it out, and it always bugs me. And that's the actual track I skip the most, is Revolution 1, more than Revolution 9. And the rest of it, I think everything else is amazing. I even love Wild Honey Pie and Piggies and all that stuff. I think it's great. I think it all flows together right. And I think this is the best double album ever made. An absolute masterpiece. Love it. My number 1 White Album. So just the Beatles. So the Beatles, number 1. Abbey Road, number 2. Revolver, number 3. Magical Mystery Tour, number 4. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, number 5. Rubber Soul, number 6. Hey Jude, number 7. Help, 8. Let It Be, 9. A Hard Day's Night, 10. Meet the Beatles, 11. The Beatles' second album, 12. Yellow Submarine, 13. and the Beatles for Sale 14. Now, I know no one else's list is going to match mine exactly, but this is what I like, how I like them. I'd like to see everyone else's. Sam, this is really cool to get this kicked up in my head again. I really loved your video, and I loved Steve's video. Go check out theirs. I'll leave links down below for both of their videos, and I'll see everyone next time. Thanks.